everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I was just laughing before we started recording it, so that's carrying over a little bit. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our next episode. Hopefully, you find this conversation engaging. I'm really interested to hear Kaitlyn and Justine's thoughts as we get into this. First thing we're going to do is check in, though, with our spies, check in spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, or social, and check in on one of those areas on how we are doing. I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with physical. I am tired, and I'm feeling old. my my foot hurts, my back hurts, my neck hurts. Okay, that's me checking in physically. Yay! I hurt. Kaitlyn, how are you feeling?
Um, that's a crazy intro, but that's okay. Um, I'm great. I would say emotional. I don't know. I've just been having like a lot of really good positive feelings lately, just like with my jobs. Really enjoying that, and I just love the people that I work with, and yeah, just like my overall environment. So yeah, it's been fun.
Superb. That's awesome that I'm in pain and you feel great. Yay, Justine.
I'm trying to pick one because I feel like I pick the same one every time. I guess maybe I'll just say emotional. I don't know. I mean, I think physically this week I also wasn't feeling the best just because of, it's that time of year, it's that season, and allergies out here in Texas. But I guess I don't know, emotionally I feel like um or maybe it was more socially. Like there was a lot of good time with family last weekend, and then we're celebrating my mom's birthday this weekend and all that kind of stuff. So that's been good to see family and all that.
Spectacular. All right. Thank you to both of you for that check-in. We're going to jump into today's discussion. Generally speaking, the topic is who should you go to for advice? That's what we're going to be talking about. Who should you seek advice from? Who is worthy of earning your trust to give you guidance in life? We're going to talk about kind of the bigger picture, like big life advice, big decisions, moral choices, spirituality, that kind of thing. And then we're going to transition into what we see as like spiritual guidance in the church leadership, pastors, priests, that kind of thing. So let's jump in with the first question of who should you go to for advice? And when you look to get advice from somebody, what is the criteria that you're using to think that you're getting good counsel or wise advice? Kaitlyn, do you have any thoughts on that?
So like who would I go to? I would probably say like my closest friends, some family, but for me growing up personally, it's mostly been like really close friends of mine that I trust and value to go to for like any of my I don't know, just like decision making or just things I need to talk about or might need help with. And then as far as like the criteria, like kind of what goes into that, I would say like someone who has strong integrity. I look for that. So obviously like someone who knows right from wrong and who is able to make the right choice, even in a circumstance of like, if it's not the popular choice or if it's, dealing with, I don't know, just there, there's like you're being perceived, right? I would more likely take advice from somebody who's not afraid of that and who's going to do the hard thing and do what's right, no matter if there's like people following along with it or not. So I would say that. And then also someone who, values loyalty, um, I think it's really important to have people who will like stick by you and, you know, not be swayed so easily by other people or other things or whatever it is. Just kind of having people who align with those kind of like morals and whatnot, is definitely who I would go to and trust for like guidance. So yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks. Justine, what would you say about that?
Um, okay, I forgot the first part of the question. So it's who would you go to for advice and what's the criteria, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I think for me, I mean, I've always had like a very small circle of people, just because I, don't talk to a lot of people about really personal things. So I would say my criteria might be a little bit different than someone else's might be, but I would say that it would be someone I tend to take advice or even just ask advice from people who know me really well, and who kind of like what Kaitlyn was saying, who do have that integrity and that loyalty, and I know they're gonna be honest with me, but at the same time, they're going to, know me well enough to, I guess, give advice that would be helpful, if that makes sense. I also think at different points throughout my life, I mean, that was kind of more when I was involved in the church, but I would also kind of seek counsel from people who were at least a little bit older than me, or like more mentor type figures, because they kind of had that extra life experience and that wisdom. Because sometimes I do also kind of need that. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that fully answered the question because I feel like that was really short, but that's kind of my thoughts on it.
No, yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm gonna ask the question in a different way because I was just thinking about this in terms for me, it's hard to really think about a criteria. Like I asked that question to you, but then I was thinking, man, Marc, that's kind of hard to just lay out these different components. I don't want you to say a name, obviously, but can you think of somebody who, let's go the opposite way with this. Can you think of somebody in your life that you're like, in your mind, you go, I would never go to them for advice. I would never go to that person for advice. And just kind of saying, like, what is it? Like, what's the characteristic or what is the attribute that sets that in your mind? Like, no, that's not a good person to go to for advice. Does that make sense, that question? Kaitlyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's kind of like someone who is the opposite of what I said, obviously. But I think too, I would look at like their life and like their life choices. Um, because I don't know, there are a lot of people who are just like hypocrites and, you know, they'll say one thing and then do another. Um, so I think just being able to differentiate what that looks like. Um, and, you know, also I think for me, like making sure the person is like emotionally mature and emotionally stable is really important. Because there are a lot of people that are like either too logical with everything or they're too emotional with everything. And I think finding that balance is what's really important. So yeah, just making sure the person actually thinks about the advice they're going to give and isn't just what's the word? Like impulsive, I guess, with their decision making. So yeah.
Okay. I thought of a question in the middle of your talking, but I didn't want to interrupt you, so then I forgot it. But no, I forgot it. Justine, what do you think?
Uh,
Sorry.
if you do think of it, you can just interrupt, because my train of thought is probably not gonna be that coherent anyway. But I guess, yeah, to your question that you just asked, who would I not go to for advice? I think, and Kaitlyn just said something that like kind of um helped me think of what I was gonna say, and now I totally forgot that too. But I think for me, it's like I guess sometimes when I'm talking to people, I can tell that they're kind of just listening, I guess, like waiting for their turn to talk, or they're just not actually listening to what I'm saying. Um, and I think people like that, or people who are kind of listening maybe for their own, I don't know, something having to do with like their own gain, I guess, or they're just trying to kind of get information and you are kind of unsure of what they might do with that information about you. I feel like that's my biggest thing. But again, that's why I've always kept such a small circle, because I do, um, that is something I kind of look for a lot of times before I do ask someone for advice or share something personal with them. Like, I'm not just going to do that with anyone. So I think that, yeah, if I kind of see how someone's interacting with someone and it's not very intentional, and there's not like active listening going on, or, different things like that. It's not reciprocal. I think that's probably my biggest, I guess, red flag for not going to someone for advice, if that makes sense.
So the active listening piece, is that really important to both of you? That you're somebody, and that kind of ties in with something I think Justine said earlier, and I was curious of, do you feel like to get good advice from someone, the person really has to know you well? Or would there be exceptions to that where no, you can get pretty good advice and counsel about what you should do in life, even from somebody who doesn't know you well?
Oh, do you want to go, Kaitlyn?
Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Are we...
It's okay. No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. I thought we were going back in our order. Okay, wait. No, you can go if you want to go first.
Okay, I was just gonna say that I think that they don't necessarily have to know you super well. I think that that's more just a personal thing, because when I am asking for advice from someone, I'm a person who like intentionally seeks that out. And so I think that it kind of by default, the only people I really go to for advice are people that I'm close to, if that makes sense. But no, I mean, I'm sure I can think of, sometimes in my life where, yeah, I did get good advice, but it wasn't necessarily someone who knew me well, but that also might have been more about slightly more superficial things. So I think when I say that, I'm talking about like the personal stuff.
Caitlin, did you want to add to that?
No, yeah, I agree with that. And like, I think it also, yeah, depends on the topic of it. If it's more surface level stuff, like, oh, should I dye my hair this color or should I do this? Like, I feel like you can kind of go to not like anyone about that, but you know what I mean? Like, that's a more like, oh, okay, like anyone could kind of give you a good answer, right? But yeah, with the more personal stuff, obviously there needs to be that level of trust and that foundation, because I agree with Justine, like I'm not just gonna blurt out like a bunch of my own, stuff to people unless I truly feel like I'm heard, valued, seen, understood by the person. So
All right. Okay. That's good. That's good. Anything else to wrap that up, that part of kind of what you're looking for from somebody to give advice? Okay. All right. That's good. Um, do you think the way you approach this matches other friends that you have as far as getting advice? Kind of similar?
yeah, I would say like all of my friends, who are like my closest friends, like near and dear to me, I would say they all possess those attributes. Because me personally, I'm very picky with my friends. I'm not just kind of super close to anyone. Like, you really have to kind of show that to me because, like, I'm showing the exact same thing. It's not like I'm having double standards. Like, I'm showing the standard that I want with my friends as well. So, um, yeah.
Justine, you good on that, or you got more to add?
No, I don't think I have more to add. I feel like, yeah, most of the people that I'm really close with have that same type of mindset for the most part.
Do you think there's a generational difference in what people view as authority to get good advice? Like, I feel like with my generation, there probably would have been more, and maybe an older generation even, there would have been more stock put in somebody's credentials or somebody's expertise or background. Do you think that's changed, like, for your generation? That's not as important, or is it? And since I'm just posing this on the spot, either one of you can answer, or both at the same time. Let's all unmute together and just have a free for all.
Oh, I
Bro
mean,
is in a silly, goofy mood today.
my answer will be short, so I can just go really quick. But I don't think that I ever look for like credentials or anything like that, unless, and this probably goes without saying, unless it's like something having to do with my mental or physical health. Like if it's, that's obviously when I'll look for that. But as far as advice, I mean, I've never really thought about that. Like, I'm assuming when you mean credentials, you mean like degrees or, yeah, like if they're a pastor, if they're, I personally have not really ever thought about that, at least not in the past several years.
I would agree with Justine. I think with the mental health aspect, yes. But then again, I don't know. I could also not play devil's advocate, but just kind of be like, there could be people that do have credentials and they could be using it to, cause destruction or cause like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like you just never know.
Oh my goodness, you just queued me up perfectly for a transition into the
Wait,
next
are you
question.
serious?
Yes, that's perfect.
Wait, stop.
Because my claim that I'm going to make, usually in these episodes, I make some type of claim at some point, and then we have to evaluate whether we agree or disagree with it. But just because someone has a title, so we're going to move into like church leadership and specifically with spiritual guidance now. Just because somebody has a title, pastor, reverend, priest, bishop, imam, rabbi, like I could go in all the different. It doesn't really matter the religion, doesn't matter the denomination, it doesn't matter the flavor of the month, spiritually speaking. Um, just because someone has a title does not necessarily mean they're a good spiritual guide or mentor. Um, I think that's changed. Like I think that's in my generation and before, the generation before mine especially, whatever the institution said, like if a seminary, if a denomination conveyed some level of authority to somebody by saying you are now the master of this, the whatever. So even like with a church pastor or somebody or a special degree, I think people always said that's the person that can be trusted with good advice. And I just don't know if that's true. Well, I know that's not always true. I so spiritual guidance. Um, I think that I wrote questions down and then put them somewhere else. No, here we go. Tell me what you all think of this. Okay. So this is good. This is gonna be good. You got to be real. You got to be really raw here and just say how you truly feel about all of this stuff, because I've lived both sides of this very intently. Like in a certain role in my life when I was in quote unquote ministry, I felt this obligation, like this duty, like I was really put upon me that I needed to shepherd the flock, quote unquote. I needed to be the shepherd to the sheep. I have a real problem with that saying now, but have you ever heard that, first of all? Okay. Um, when you hear that, or when you heard that growing up, like I'm sure you heard it in religious circles then, I guess, right? Okay, what did that mean? What did you think that meant? That that person was supposed to do as your shepherd?
Um, I felt like that meant like making sure that the person was abiding by like the Bible or the rules of religion. Um, and also like making sure that you were converting people to Christ.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Justine, anything else that you had with that?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, you're asking specifically about the phrase like when we heard that someone's job was to shepherd the flock.
Yeah, to shepherd you. Yeah. Did you ever
Uh,
hear that growing up for either one of you, that like the spiritual leader, the pastor in your church was your shepherd? Like,
yeah,
so did you take that to mean that they were supposed to do anything different than what Kaitlyn just said?
I don't think so. No, I think I just saw it as like yeah, we're supposed to guide us, I guess, but I think I saw that from a very like religious only perspective almost, but I do think that it could be and has been used to, speak on other aspects of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think a big thing for me that fell into that description of that role was making sure that I protected the flock from like bad teachings or immoral behaviors or something. Like it was my job somehow to protect them from bad things. And part of my concern with that idea now is that I think it's very, very quickly bad things become bad people. Like, like I think it's really easy for somebody who thinks they're supposed to shepherd the flock and protect people, like, oh, well, then we got to keep them away from A, B, and C. But A, B, and C become other humans, like other people with different ideas. And so to me, it serves a whole counterproductive, like almost antichrist behavior, because now you're telling people to not be friends or not be in relationship with people who might think differently, be of a different political persuasion, disagree, things like that. So that's one of my big problems with it now. Um, so do you think that in churches or any religious settings that it is necessary for there to be a guide, a person in authority that is keeping the members of that group from like false doctrines or heretical teachings? That was a poorly worded question.
Sorry. The way we both went for the unmute button. Okay, wait, sorry, ask it again. I'm sorry.
It was a poorly worded question. Let me ask it a different way, because this goes to the idea of needing guidance or counsel. So you're speaking on behalf of your generation now. So get it right. Um, do you need to be protected from things?
Uh, yes. Yes, but I think it's important to note that life is also inevitable. And as much as you can guide someone and give them the tools that they need to try to protect them from the world is still going to happen to them, you know? Like bad things are still going to occur. Like there's bad people, you know? Um, and so I think if anything, it's making sure that you just have a good like head on your shoulders, you know? Like I think it kind of goes back to like having good integrity is what will help you. But I think kind of going back on what you were saying with the whole like shepherd of the flock or whatever, I think having like giving people who are like their leaders or whatever, like that kind of responsibility to make sure that people don't do bad or whatever. It's like people also learn through mistakes. Some of them might not be like, irreversible mistakes, but I just mean like smaller mistakes in life, right? People learn from that. And so I think if anything, the goal shouldn't be to keep people from like seeing and exploring other things. I think if anything, it's just like making sure that they have like that good sense of morality within them, right? That then you can trust that they're going to make good decisions, hopefully. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone can really control anyone. As far as like the choices they make, their actions, what that can look like, what will happen to them. Because yeah, at the end of the day, like it's all kind of inevitable, you know? So
Yeah, it's interesting that I made a note, I was writing this word down, and it's interesting that in your answer, because my question was, do you need protection? Like, do you need somebody to protect you from like false teachings and things like that? And at the end of your answer, you said control. And that's what I was going to ask is what's the difference between someone protecting you versus controlling you?
uh that's a loaded question. No, I'm just kidding. um I think someone who's trying to protect you, I think they have good intentions. So that's, I think, the key difference versus someone who's trying to control you. They have their own intentions at heart. It's only about them and what they want to gain from, you know, telling you what to do, right? It's not out of actual care, but what's confusing is that people who do try to control you will frame it that way. But that goes into a lot of other things that we're not going to get onto a tangent with. So, you know, that's, yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting because I was sitting here thinking that when I was in a church leadership role, I felt like even now looking back on it, I felt like I had the best of intentions. Like I really felt like I had genuine intentions to care for somebody. And so I needed to protect them from certain things. But in so doing, I was trying to control them. So I don't know that the distinction is about intention. It could still have good intentions and still be a controlling schmuck. Maybe. Anyway,
I
Justine,
like how
or Kaitlyn.
self-aware you are, Mark. That was very bold of you to say that. So
Oh, wow. Thanks.
props to you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Justine, any more thoughts?
Uh,
Or or we could just let Kaitlyn keep talking because she complimented me.
uh, I'll put myself on mute in a minute, but no, I was just gonna say that yes, like what you both were kind of saying, I think that the whole protecting thing can cross over into control quickly. Sometimes I think that I would also agree with what you were saying, Mark, about how and I definitely understand where Kaitlyn was coming from too. I think with certain people, the distinction with control and protection could be intentions. But yeah, I think when you're in the church, it gets a little bit more complex, I guess, or layered because we do think that, you know, when we're in the church and especially, I mean, not that I've ever been in leadership in the church, but like I can imagine that um that puts even more pressure on you to, you know, abide by what you believe, abide by what the Bible's saying, abide by what maybe other pastors or other church leadership are telling you. And so I think that, I mean, I don't know what, I guess at that point, like the distinction might just be impact, like impact versus intention. And even if you do have good intentions, and I mean, that's true for anything, you can still negatively impact someone. And so I think that maybe that's also the distinction, and then being able to recognize that even though, and that's a hard thing to recognize, even when you have good intentions, the best intentions, and you still negatively impacted someone. I mean, that still happens.
You know, it's interesting to think about the irony of this is as we're talking about this is like what you just said about in being in church leadership. I'm wondering about the aspect of how much being controlled causes someone to then turn around and control or attempt to control others. because we talk about this in church and we talk about church leadership, like how bad church leadership at like that pastor level can be. But the level above that for the denominational headquarters or whoever, different denominations and churches have their hierarchy that's different. But as I'm thinking about how I was trying to protect or control people with good intentions, a lot of that was because of how much I was being controlled. Like at the next level up, I had to make sure I, you know, walked within certain parameters, walked within certain lines all the time. And that's just now dawning on me how then I turned around and then just did that to other people. Okay, well, I'll get sad if I think about that too long. Let's move on to this thought right here. So the I am called to shepherd the flock thing, I think, is an issue. The other big thing I will just say that I think is an issue with this is I get where people draw this from, but this goes to that thing we talked about the other day that I made reference to, people just picking verses out of context or taking certain verses and running with them. But I believe there's a very clear teaching where Jesus said, hey, that's my job. Like, I am the chief shepherd. I am the shepherd. The sheep, the flock, they're mine. Like, I already have that job. Nobody else needs to sign up for it, kind of thing. And I think that's a pretty clear teaching in the New Testament. The other thing that I think church leaders feel a sense to do that might be a concern is they're called to build the church. Like, it's my job to build the church and build the kingdom of God, which again, I would argue Jesus has already kind of made clear. Again, my job, stop trying to take my job. I'll build the church the way I want it built. But there's that. So now I'm going to open up a can of worms with this last one. I think I super was guilty of this. I still am guilty of this. I mean, even in what I'm doing now, this gets there sometimes. I felt responsible for other people's spiritual growth. And so I felt like, well, if I'm responsible for their spiritual growth, then certainly I can influence their spiritual growth. I can control, I can orchestrate their spiritual growth. So I want your opinion on this. Can somebody orchestrate or coordinate someone else's spiritual growth? What are your thoughts on that? Oh, I love that look. The look, that was deep. Okay. You're both looking up and to the side, which I don't remember if that means you're trying to remember something or lie, or or
Lie is
thinking
crazy.
or thinking deeply about something. But I'm gonna say it means you're thinking deeply about something. So,
It means, I don't know what to say. I'm scared.
can somebody direct someone else's spiritual growth?
Just kidding.
To what extent?
I think that they can maybe have some sort of influence, but as far as like actually changing the relationship and making the relationship whole or whatever, no. Because I think that has to come from the person themselves and whether or not that's something that they truly accept and want, you know?
Uh, sorry. I think that I don't know because when I hear that, like, can someone orchestrate someone else's spiritual journey, which I think was a question, right?
Spiritual growth. Yeah.
Spiritual growth. Okay. I don't know. When I hear that, I do again kind of think about how that type of mindset I feel like can just cross over into control very quickly. And then I think a lot of times when people tend to feel controlled, I would argue, especially in a religious aspect, they tend to grow up or leave that faith and rebel in some way. And then whether they come back to that faith or not, but either way, they kind of have to, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how to describe this, but I was thinking about, I guess I'll just describe it this way because I have been thinking about this since we've been talking, but I just think that and again, this is, in my opinion, deconstruction at its core. I think that sometimes wandering, or what, the church defines as wandering, or stepping back, or whatever that looks like, that sometimes leads to even more growth, or it just leads to a lot of valuable discovery. And I think that kind of like parents with kids, as far as spiritual growth, all you can do is give someone the tools. Like, as a leader, I think the most powerful thing you can do is just give people the tools and give them the knowledge and just let them do what they will with that, because there is also the piece of free will that we have, and that, is something that the Bible tells us that God gave Adam and Eve and, wanted them to have. So I think that, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if any of that made sense or even answer the question, but I think that people can orchestrate another person's spiritual growth. However, I think that depending on how they approach it, that can have negative consequences.
All right. Kaitlyn, did you have anything else to add to that? I know you talked about it. Did you? No. Okay. So I'm going to circle back to the criteria question about looking for someone that can give you guidance. I always come back to the fruit of the spirit, and I think that again is the criteria for me, kind of the litmus test. So if I see somebody who is loving, if I see somebody who seems to promote peace and have peace in their lives and not creating distress all the time, patience, like somebody who's patient and can kind of put up with something and endure certain things. To me, all of this fruit of the spirit is not just fruit of the spirit, but it's signs of wisdom, like, and um, kindness, like somebody who can be kind even when somebody is opposing them or antagonizing them or something like that. All of those things. So the fruit of the spirit for me would be what I would look to. I'm in a time in my life where there's certain specific things that I need, like in terms of business advice or financial advice, things like that. And so I'll go to somebody that has a specialty or an expertise in that. But as far as spiritual guidance and like big life decisions, I really want to see the fruit of somebody's life. And I think that's what you both were saying earlier. I wonder, one clarification I was going to ask about that when you said that earlier is that, is there more to it than that? Like you said something earlier and it made me think of the phrase people will say, get your own house in order before you try to get somebody else's house in order. Does that go along the same lines with what you were saying earlier? I'm getting a nod. So Kaitlyn nodded in agreement.
Are you asking if, like, the criteria would be that someone else would kind of need to have their life together before they give advice, or what's the question?
Yeah, kind
That
of, yeah.
Not for me. Like, yes, they need to have certain qualities, but if they're going through a rough time or whatever that looks like, I don't necessarily, I'm not going to negate their advice, if that makes sense.
Mhm. I don't know if I see going through a rough time the same as not having your house in order. Like, um, I have a friend right now who's going through a rough time, just lost a loved one and stuff. There's a lot of grieving. There's a lot of like reprioritizing things in their life. I see that as going through a rough time. I don't see that as a person who doesn't have their house in order, like that there's out of sorts. I guess I mean more like, are you looking for, if you're going to get relationship advice from somebody, but you look at their life and you go, well, you kind of just ruined the last 3 relationships you had by the way you treated people. So I think that's what we're talking about. Is that what y'all are meaning more? Like,
Yeah, you mean like more like to their core, like who they are as a person, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so. I'm trying not to, I don't want to just ramble, but I'm trying for us as people from 2 different generations to really like pull out the what is it that we have in common as just as human beings that we're looking for that make us trust other human beings.
Yeah.
Because part of the thing earlier when you talked about active listening and people knowing you, I agree. I don't think somebody really needs to know me that well to be able to give me some really good advice. I got some really wise counsel earlier this week, I felt like, and the person doesn't know me that well, but they did take the time to ask some questions and at least get some understanding first. So I do think that's important. Um,
Do you believe in like kindred spirits?
I don't know. Sure.
Okay. Because I feel like sometimes when that is like, if you meet someone who's like that, sometimes there is like that unspoken like understanding.
Yeah.
Y'all
Kindred
just like
spirits. Yeah.
get each
Kindred
other.
spirits.
Yeah.
Unlike, imagine the scenario. Someone comes to you and asks you, they're looking for a good mentor in their life, and you're going to direct them to find a good mentor. What do you tell them to look for?
Um, I mean, I think kind of what we were already talking about, if you want to make it super simple, like qualities that are listed out as fruits of the spirit. I don't think a mentor has to, necessarily align with your beliefs and values completely, but I do think that if you're going to go to someone with advice or you're going to go to someone for advice, they should, you know, at their core probably hold the same values. Um, and this might just be something that's only important for me, but I would say like look for someone who is going to be an active listener, who's going to, listen to hear, and not only to respond. And I think I would also say, although I agree with your point that wisdom doesn't necessarily come from age, I do think that experiences, I don't know, just for me, like when I've gone to people for advice, it does matter to me what they've experienced, how they've handled those experiences, different things like that. So I would say that, um, yeah, I don't know, to just maybe look for someone who does kind of have like similar experiences or similar, yeah, I don't know, similar experiences, I think. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I would say to look for. And again, this might only be a me thing, but I would also, if someone's looking for a mentor, I would say definitely someone who's open-minded, but also has that integrity, because I think that's really important when you're trusting someone to give you that type of guidance.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with everything Justine said. Yeah, I mean, she kind of said it perfectly. I don't really have much to to add to that. I mean, that's what I would also say.
Wait, can I just say one more thing? I don't know if this is gonna help land the plane or if you're gonna have to edit, like, if when you edit it, you're gonna edit out what you said. But I did really like what you said earlier about, um, if someone's looking for a mentor, they're looking for someone to give them guidance, but then also to still be able to own their own life.
Mhm.
I think that, well, I don't know. I just really liked that part of it because I do think that that is so important. And I would argue that that is why sometimes the spiritual leadership in the church gets a little bit blurry, because I think that there's kind of that, there's those blurred boundaries of like, what am I responsible for as a pastor? What are you responsible for as the church or as the people of the church? What is Jesus and God responsible for, like according to the Bible? So I think that that, and for me, that is a really important piece, that I know I can go to someone for advice, but that they're also going to know me well enough and trust me well enough to know that I'm capable of making my own decisions, and I, have a good head on my shoulders. Like there's also that respect piece to
Mhm.
it. So I think, and I would argue that that is sometimes what is missing in the church, because I think that, and that's a whole other tangent probably. I think there's a lot of reasons why that is, but I think that that might be part of what's missing. And I do think that that's such an important piece of a mentor, of getting advice, of all that kind of stuff.
Wow, you were holding out on us. That did land the plane. That was good. That was really good. Yeah. I'm not going to say anything else to screw that up. After that, we can conclude and wrap up there. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your opinions. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. What are your thoughts? Share with us what your thoughts are about who you should go to for advice, what makes a good mentor, what makes a good spiritual guide. What are your thoughts about church leadership, all that good stuff. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye.